Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started. I'm Rick Sutterston. I'm the director of the College Board Center here, and it's my pleasure today to introduce Roger Rennekamp, who is Associate Dean for Outreach and Engagement in our college. And in that role, Roger provides administrative leadership to a wide array of outreach and engagement programs, including things like Extension's Family and Community Health Program, 4-H programs, Kids Spirit, Team Oregon, and also a public health practice improvement initiative. The idea for this particular talk came about last summer. We had an administrative retreat for a couple of days. And I don't know if those are really retreats, but they're hard work. But in any case, so much of our talk is always about how central Extension is, of course, to a land-grant institution. And in our own College of Public Health and Human Sciences, how important Extension is in the kinds of work that we do here and the kind of commitments we're making. And yet, for so many of us, Extension is something that's not very well understood. And so we asked Roger on the spot for a 10-minute primer on the history of Extension and our own programs here. And what we witnessed was something truly amazing. In those 10 minutes, in very rapid speech, he was able to recount extraordinary details going back over a century on the history of Extension at large in the United States and also locally here in our own institution. And so we realized, gosh, we all learned so much in those couple of minutes that it would be great for all of us to gain that same knowledge. And so we asked Roger to join us in the seminar series so that he could share exactly that. And so with that, please give Roger a warm welcome.
Well, thanks, Rick. What began as a dinner conversation around a big round table grew into something a whole lot bigger. So instead of like the 3 minutes and 18 seconds or the 10 minutes or whatever we did at that round table dinner discussion, it grew into a little bit longer of a presentation that we're going to go through today. Well, I wasn't sure if everybody would have the same level of enthusiasm, for coming to hear about the history of the land-grant university. So I actually even sent out an email, to some folks this morning over in Ballard, that kind of work for the Extension Outreach team. And, I tried to convince them, even with some of the previous comments, like for coming attractions, sometimes you see, comments from USA Today or all these magazines. So I actually put in some quotes, into this email I sent to some of my colleagues today, trying to attract some additional attention today. And I put in some of these quotes like, "That was quite tolerable," or "not nearly as bad as I thought it would be," okay? And so some people, I wanted to boost attendance today a little bit, by making sure that we had some people here today. So anyway, this is not going to be what I would call a typical research presentation. It's probably going to be, if anything, of a research presentation, it's going to be a little bit of historical research in terms of, how did we get to where we are, as a land-grant institution? And I hope we have a little bit of fun over the next, 25, 30, 40 minutes or something like that as we walk through the presentation. But one of the things that I've always thought was really important is all of us associated with this thing called a land-grant university that is Oregon State University, that all of us, whether we're students, whether faculty, staff, whoever we are, we need to understand a little bit about why we are here and how this institution and this network of special institutions across the country actually came into being. So, we're going to go back, since we have more time than a dinner conversation, we're actually going to go back to the late 1700s. So a couple of centuries. If you let's go back in time a little bit, and if we think back about, the United States in the late 1700s, some of you who may have been good at U.S. history actually remember what the Treaty of Paris was. Does anybody remember the Treaty of Paris of 1783? Yes, sir.
Did it give us the Louisiana Purchase a little bit, or am I totally off base there?
Yeah, probably totally off base, yeah. Nice try. It may have been a part of it, but generally, the Treaty of Paris 1783 actually ended the Revolutionary War. Okay, ended the Revolutionary War, and brought to close, kind of this number of years, and that kind of stuff that we had been involved in, in the Revolutionary War. Okay, and this was a time when the United States was transforming from, being involved in the independence of the country or involved in being a war country to becoming, a very new country with many, many people to feed, with a great need to feed those individuals, and to transfer from that military economy really to an agricultural economy. And at that point in time, 85% of the people in this country in 1800, were employed in agriculture. Think about that. 8.5 or 8 out of 10 people were involved in agriculture in some sort. And one of the things that really happened was that, and we talk about the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, that really, in fact, did give us more land than we ever had before. Remember how much more land became a part of the United States at a particular point in time. So, we were in this particular point in our economy where we were trying to feed a new nation, we needed better agricultural products, and we needed to produce some higher yields at that particular point in time. So just setting the context of the country, very agriculture-oriented society. And as we talked about with the land, the availability of land led to a whole lot of poor farming. Once you exhausted the land in one place, what did you do? You just moved farther west, right, until you got to Oregon, okay? So, that was one of the things that I think that as we go through the presentation today, we're going to be talking a lot about land, and the land grant. But remember this, too, the availability of land led to poor farming, deterioration of the soil. Availability of land will be an interesting theme as we go through today. So one of the couple of things happened, in the late 1700s and the early 1800s is that, as we said, there was kind of a need to improve agricultural production in the country, trying to feed this growing nation at that particular point in time, and to move out of this notion of simply exhausting land and moving on to other land. There was some growing effort to improve agricultural practice, and most of that didn't come from universities at that time. You didn't go to college to learn how to farm at that particular point in time, but there were some efforts to try to figure out how we can improve some things in terms of how we're producing the food that we need in the country for this growing nation. And, the first efforts to improve agriculture actually began, with Benjamin Franklin. We know Franklin for an awful lot of other stuff, don't we? But we don't really realize that he was actually the founder or organizer of the Philadelphia Society for Promoting Agriculture in 1785. Nobody really thought the Berkshire Agricultural Society organized in Massachusetts. And, we still have, and this is one of the earliest times that really fairs and shows were used in this country to distribute agricultural innovations. 1811, Berkshire Agricultural Society, most of the first fairs, like the county fairs we still deal with today, actually originated, in the United States in the early part of the 1800s. And then by 1861, there were 900 societies across the country that really were focused on improving agricultural production. So at the same time, we also saw all this land that we had as a new country was really the cash of the new country. We were kind of a cash-rich country, a cash-poor country, but we had all this land that came through these different acquisitions and purchases and things like that. So one of the things we had was cash as currency. So one of the things that we saw happen was that at the close of the Revolutionary War, a lot of the land was just given to the soldiers who had fought in the Revolutionary War. Other land was sold to land companies, land companies, many of those around the West. Land Act of 1800 allowed land to be sold directly to settlers. The Public Railway Act gave land to the railroads. And the Homestead Act of 1862, a lot of you remember that, gave 160 acres of land to individuals who would improve the land and live on it for 6 months. Okay, so this was our cash of our country, that to get people to do things, to expand westward, we really gave away a lot of the land that the country had at that particular point in time. So again, this recurring theme of giving away land will make a big difference as we come along. So if you think back, to the mid-1800s, most of the colleges across the country were private colleges, and many of them were church-affiliated colleges across the country, right? And most of those colleges taught the classical studies, okay, of literature and mathematics and things like that. There was not a whole lot of practical instruction in universities that really prepared people for the careers that they were, or the jobs that were available in this new country. And if you were, in fact, planning on going to college, you better be wealthy, you better be white, and you better be a man, okay? Because those were the only people that really had an opportunity to attend college in the mid-1800s. So there was a growing interest in figuring out, number one, how do we have a college for, at that time, what they called the common people, the people that were not wealthy white men at that particular point in time, and how do we really educate the majority of the people of the country? And one of the challenges really was that what was being taught at those universities at that time, the classical studies, didn't really prepare people for the work to be done in agriculture, or in the late 1800s, really, a new industrial society. So it didn't match what was really needed to prepare people for the work that needed to be done in the country. But interestingly, it was some of the colleges like Columbia and Harvard, that some of you have had some history in, that were the first ones to really begin to do practical instruction that related to the vocations of the people there. That Harvard and Yale were actually some of the first colleges in the country that actually began to advance or teach agriculture, which I think was a surprise to me and probably many of you as well. Because remember, in the early part of the 1800s, 85% was involved in agriculture, and there was no way of instructing or to provide training in scientific agriculture. But then it was Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Maryland that were the first established colleges of agriculture. But one of the challenges was that these institutions that began to do this work really struggled for a number of years with this new endeavor to help people learn skills that they needed for their careers. So here's two fellows up here that everybody probably recognizes one of them, right? Yeah, the guy over here on the right, Lincoln. But who's the other fellow there? Anybody recognize him? Huh? Morrill? Justin Morrill. Absolutely right. You get a point. Absolutely, yeah. Justin Morrill. How many people got any degree from Ohio State University or ever attended classes at OSU or the other OSU? The other OSU. So if you go to Ohio State University in Columbus, who now has what, 63,000 I think students roughly. Ohio State, two prominent buildings. Okay, the two most prominent buildings at Ohio State University are Lincoln Tower and Morrill Tower. Okay, the two prominent buildings. Justin Morrill, who you'll learn about a little bit more in a second, was a senator from Vermont. Okay, senator from Vermont for whom the Morrill Act, that you'll come to know very well in a few minutes, and actually the second Morrill Act was named. And so the Morrill Act of 1862, also known as kind of the College Land Bill or the College Land Grant Act, it has a lot of different names, was first introduced by Justin Morrill in 1857. And this particular bill was to create this college for the common people, okay, or for the people that were not currently available or able to go to the universities that existed in the country. So he introduced the College Land Bill in 1857. And what this bill would do would donate federal land. Okay, remember, land was the currency. That's all. We didn't have any cash, but we could give away land as a country. It would give federal land to states to sell to support agriculture and mechanics colleges. Okay, and if you took the first letter of agriculture and mechanics, okay, you come up with A&M, don't you? And many of the A&M colleges across the country that began by teaching agriculture and mechanical arts, and also military sciences, as you'll see in just a second. Those were the type of colleges that this particular college land bill would create. So the bill, yeah, so it was brought in 1857. But you know, it was interesting. What do you think? So President Buchanan actually vetoed the college land bill in 1857 because the senators and representatives from the southern states lobbied President Buchanan and said, what do you think the southern states might actually say about the federal government getting involved in education? Okay, even then, okay, 150 years ago, southern states did not want the federal government coming in and telling them how they're going to educate their people, okay? So they got to President Buchanan, okay, and got him to veto that because this is just bad business. We don't want the federal government to create federal colleges in our states, do we? Okay, so Buchanan actually vetoed it for several reasons, and it was really the South argued that it was a states' rights issue. Interesting. Civil War came. So all the southern states seceded from the Union, and Justin Morrill, of course, being a senator from Vermont, reintroduced this legislation, and guess what? It passed in 1862. And but interesting is that one of the things that really helped it pass, because, you know, here the Union was really trying to win the Civil War, they added a condition that said it would also support the training of military tactics, okay, at these land-grant universities. So if you look at Virginia Tech and A&M, you know, that military style, even in the band uniforms today and the ROTC programs at those universities, are still prominent parts of land grants that really came during the Civil War. So it was actually signed by Lincoln, and that's why we had Morrill and Lincoln a couple of minutes ago. And what the land grant did was give 30,000 acres of land, of federal land, for each senator or representative or each member of Congress. So for however many your state had, you took that number and you multiplied it by 30,000. And at that time, we had 3 members of Congress, okay? And Oregon accepted 90,000 acres of public land, which could be sold to start a college. So it's interesting. The land grant, again, gave land that could be sold to create an endowment to start the university, okay? Well, where was Oregon's land? So this is actually part of Oregon's archives, Oregon State University's archives. And these little red spots down here are actually the tracts of land in the state of Oregon. Okay, Lake, Klamath, and I think we're over here kind of in Jackson and Coos area. Those are the actual 90,000 acres of land that were given to the university to eventually sell and start the university. And what was interesting, too, you know, is that lots of times people think that the land that was granted to the university was actually the land that they built the universities on. Well, that wasn't true. You know, Oregon, California, Washington, the land that was given to states back east, okay, was actually out west, okay? So it wasn't necessarily, oh, here's a piece of land to build a university on. No, it was land that could be sold to create an endowment. So even places back east, their land was out here. So I'll talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, but a couple of years ago, we actually celebrated, you know, in 2012, we celebrated the sesquicentennial. Got it out. The sesquicentennial, I got it out one time, of the signing of the Morrill Act, okay? And big celebration on the Mall in Washington, D.C., okay, a couple of years ago. And we had a number of administrators, faculty, staff, you know, from Oregon State University go to Washington, D.C., and we had a big OSU had a big display out on the mall outdoors, you know, and one of the things that they gave away that day was actual land. This, in this bottle, is part of that land. You know, they bottled this stuff as symbolic, you know, of the university. if you want to hold it, you can, but I'll pass it around. But, you know, you've seen dirt before, you know, and you've seen a vial before, I'm sure. So, but you can say you touched the vial in which the land that was granted to Oregon was in. Yeah, Tony?
Do you happen to know if any other parts of Oregon became the basis for those eastern colleges?
I don't know. You know, it's interesting. I think there's an opportunity. There are places you can go to find out where those tracts of land were, but I suspect there was other Oregon land that was used by other universities because, well, we have a lot of land here. So, but I don't know, Tony. I don't know.
Don't they feel indebted if they do?
They should feel indebted to Oregon, yeah. So, anyway, here's a fellow here. And a lot of you have actually been in a building on campus named for this fellow. This is Asa Finley, okay, who was the first president of Oregon's new land-grant college. So basically what we did was, you know, after the Land-Grant Act was passed in 1862, it took us a couple of years to get the university started in 1868. Corvallis College, okay, was already here. It was kind of a Methodist-affiliated college here in Corvallis. Was designated as the land grant here, okay? And President Finley became the first president of Oregon's new land-grant college. Finley Hall over there, where I think some of the business centers were for a little while, dormitory most of the time, but they actually put the business centers in there for a little while. But we became kind of the A&M College, Corvallis College at that particular point in time. And we had our first graduating class from Oregon State University was in 1870, and we had 3 graduates. And it was interesting because I mentioned it was affiliated by the Methodist Episcopal Church at that time, and it actually stayed affiliated with it for almost 20 years afterwards until the state of Oregon actually took on the full responsibility for this thing that was called Corvallis College. So, there's some folks in the room, I'm sure, that have had some economics courses, right, and studied supply and demand. Okay? Well, okay, so we're giving away land in the Homestead Act. We're giving land to the railways. We're giving land away. And we're also giving land to the universities and said, yeah, now go out and try and sell it. Well, land was cheap. Okay, land was cheap. Big supply of land, the price went down, so we got less money than we thought we were going to get for this endowment to build the college because land prices went down because we had flooded the country had flooded the market with land. So we really didn't have a whole lot of money to start the university, so it struggled for some time. And here's the interesting part. We first started as a teaching college to start teaching people to prepare them for kind of the vocations that they were employed in at that particular point in time. But there really wasn't a whole lot of research to support the teaching at that particular time, particularly in ag and mechanics and things like that. So where are you going to find your first professors to work there? Okay? Well, they were people that were actually employed in the professions that may or may not have had a formal college education. And at the time, we also weren't doing any agricultural or mechanical or engineering, which it became over time, you know, research at the college. So that was one of the problems. We were just a teaching institution at that particular point in time. So a couple of years ago, yeah, 1887, there was some question about, well, where is the new knowledge coming from that we're teaching these students? You know, where's the new knowledge, the innovations, the discoveries, the research? Is that going on at the colleges? No, there wasn't. And still, back in 1887, the majority of people, you're thinking, this still as an agricultural college because everybody the majority was still involved in the production of food, in agriculture. There were a couple of private experimental farms, but those really couldn't meet the demand for new information for agriculture. So numerous bills were introduced from 1882 to 1887, but a bill by William Henry Hatch was passed in 1887 that provided money for the land-grant institutions to have agricultural experiment stations and research farms that would add the research component to the land-grant universities. Remember, first came teaching, then the Hatch Act actually brought the research function to these land-grant universities, and most of the land grants have got either a main farm, like we've got, okay, west of town, and then also these experiment stations located all across the state, and you'll see a map of those in a couple of seconds. Well, you know, Justin Morrill must have been in Congress as long as Strom Thurmond, because he was still around in 1890, okay? You know, 1868, you know, that's quite almost 30 years later, he was still in Congress. And he realized that, you know, these colleges were really struggling. They didn't have the money that they needed to be successful. So he brought forth another bill that became known as the Second Morrill Act of 1890, and he led the campaign to really get some more money for these new A&M colleges out there. But it was interesting because one of the things in 1890 that became a stipulation of the Morrill Act was that for an institution to get this additional money, there could be no stipulations, you know, that, well, contained stipulations that fair and equitable accommodations must be made for black students, okay? Because at that time, most of these land-grant universities were not accepting black students at that particular point in time. Still only white students were attending these land-grant institutions. But there was a condition that said if you're going to get this Morrill Act money, okay, additional money for your college, you cannot make a distinction of race in the admission of students to those particular colleges. Well, again, you know, it was a very interesting time because the southern states said, no, we're not going to admit black students, you know, to our university. Most of the states said, yes, that's fine, we'll accept the conditions of the Second Morrill Act. But there was a compromise reached in the southern states that there would have to be a separate but equal land-grant institution for black students at that particular point in time. And so that condition was allowed, and today there are 17 historically black colleges and universities across the South that were created as a result of the Second Morrill Act of 1890. Allowed those states to receive money, okay, but in fact it was on the condition that you either admit black students to your college or you have to establish another one in your state. So there are, in addition to land-grant universities, 1862 land grants in all the states, there's also 1890 land grants in each state as well. Unfortunately, they're still underfunded. Those 1890 institutions are still underfunded, as you know, as they have been for over 100 years. So back to Agricultural College here. Enrollment grew to 85 students in 1890. We were hopping then. You know, we were on our way to 30,000. And in 1907, they changed the name from Corvallis College to Oregon Agricultural College. In 1927, it became Oregon State Agricultural College. And then in 1961, we became Oregon State University. Our college was created in 1908, okay? The College of Domestic Science. And over there in Ballard Hall, there are some old extension publications that were actually produced by our college about hot topics of the day like bed making. Okay? There was actually a publication that I read that was step by step for changing the linens on your bed. Step number 1 was remove all the sheets from the bed. Step number 2 was I kid you not, step number 2 was throw them on the floor. Okay? So we were doing cutting edge stuff back there in 1908. You know, these were the issues of the time. Okay? But seriously, there were an awful lot of challenges that, in addition to agriculture, rural families had challenges, you know, about preserving food safely so they didn't kill the family, okay, about all types of things that at that time we called domestic science, okay. And OSU had grown to 1,351 students by 1908. We're coming along now. So then the question began, okay, this is good stuff. We're doing great research here on the campus. We're educating students, you know, almost 1,500 people by that time. But the question arose is that, what if you can't get to Corvallis? How do the people of the state learn about all the great innovations that are happening at the university? And if you weren't fortunate enough to be a student at the university, how do the people in some of these remote counties, in frontier counties that many are still called, how do they get benefit from the university? So it was interesting. We started with some notions of, across the country, Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee hired George Washington Carver, who came up with the idea of these movable schools. in 1899, where they used mule-drawn wagons to take the faculty of the university out to the counties. And those were some long trips, believe me, you know, but they were using mule-drawn wagons, okay? We have a motor pool now over there, but no mules in it, but we can still get out to those particular counties. But there would be kind of this caravan of extension, not extension faculty at that time, but they were just faculty of the university that would go out, and wherever they could get a group of people. I remember reading some of the old archives of the University of Kentucky while I was there, and quote, they said, you know, hey, we'd go any place there was an adequate hall that would guarantee at least 50 people, okay? If they could say 50 people would be there, we'd be there with our faculty, okay? Well, here was another little innovation that came along, was the agricultural trains. And they began first in Iowa in 1903, where college lecturers traveled by train and gave lectures at every stop. Okay, so and again, a lot of you know that that I began my career at the University of Kentucky and was there for quite some time. But so some of this stuff I already had with me. But in 1911, Kentucky had an agricultural train that had the baggage coach, you know, filled with educational displays and exhibits all the way down. That pull into the train station, people would walk through the baggage coach and see the latest science from the university. And often, you know, if you remember the way the train cars were, they'd have a railing across the back, and the faculty would talk to people at the train station, and then they'd pull off and go to the next place and give their lectures there. In Kentucky, there was a 1912 train that was 29 days. 8 cars full of new science from the university, and went on for 29 days. And those pretty much ended, you know, across the country in the mid-1900s, because then we were beginning to move into the next war of the World War I. Now, the other thing that we know that I think is very interesting as well is that, and you'll see a quote in a couple of minutes, is that one of the other early ways of getting information to people was the demonstration method. And there was a fellow named Seaman Knapp who was president of Iowa State College at that point in time, and he came up with the idea that, gosh, if we actually went in communities, and again, still an agricultural focus, but if we took some of these new practices, new varieties, and actually planted them on the land of the people we're trying to influence, and they could see results on their land, you know, we're going to have a whole lot better success in getting them to adopt new practices at that point in time. So after he left Iowa State, he had this idea of demonstrations in communities. At age 69, he started doing this work, okay? And the government gave him a little bit of money to try this demonstration method. Some of these first demonstration farms were done in Terrell, Texas, on the W.C. Porter farm at that particular point in time. He had some success there because he got the community actually to insure this guy's crop in case these newfangled ideas from the college didn't work. So the people in the community actually banded together and put in a pool of money that if Mr. Porter lost all his farm that year by trying this newfangled stuff from the university, they would actually pay him, okay? So it was actually community-supported demonstration. Isn't that an interesting way of doing things? And then that worked. You know, he doubled his yields that first year using the university practices that were recommended. And then in 1904, they sent Knapp down to the south because the boll weevil was devastating the cotton industry down there, and he in fact put in some disease-resistant practices and that kind of thing that helped really save the South and its cotton farms at that point in time. So that demonstration method was born at that time. So here's Seaman Knapp, and this is his quote. He says, "What a man hears, he may doubt. What he sees, he may possibly doubt. But what he does for himself, he cannot doubt." Okay? And that's probably one of his most famous quotes. Probably never heard it before, but still, that's what he is known for. And this whole thing, you know, is as we talk about experiential learning today, okay? Really, you know, this is the notion of really learn by doing, okay? Is that instead of lecture, the actual opportunity to do and learn and reflect and apply. So interesting, this guy, W.C. Stallings, was actually the first county extension agent. He really is not a part of Duck Dynasty, okay, even though he looks like, you know, he could actually walk right into the program today. But he was hired as the first permanent extension agent that was assigned off of the campus to work in Smith County, Texas. And then also in 1906, Thomas Campbell was the first black field agent on appointment with USDA. He was hired to work by Tuskegee in Alabama and was working off the campus, you know, to help disseminate knowledge and information to the people there. So there was this growing interest in getting off campus and sharing the knowledge. Well, in 1909, Teddy Roosevelt appointed what was the Country Life Commission. And the Country Life Commission was really trying to figure out how do we really improve the quality of life in rural America. And he said, the actual report in 1909 said that each state college of agriculture should organize as soon as possible a complete department of extension, so managed as to reach every person on the land in the state with both information and inspiration. And that kind of set the stage. This Country Life Commission set the stage for congressional funding. Well, here are two fellows. Again, probably don't recognize those folks. I wouldn't even expect you to. But the guy on the left is a man named Hoke Smith from the state of Georgia. Okay, Hoke Smith was actually governor of Georgia for a little while, but he was a U.S. senator who helped with the guy on the right, Francis Lever, from South Carolina. He's a little scary, though. I mean, he's got that piercing stare. Francis Weaver from South Carolina. These two got together and they sponsored what became known as the Smith-Lever Act. Okay? The Smith-Lever Act actually is known as creating the Extension Service of the country. Okay? It was passed in 1914. They looked at several bills up until that point in time. It was passed in May of 1914 and gave money to states to start extension services that could put people off of the campus in communities to share the knowledge and information of the universities in those places. And then a federal memorandum of understanding outlined kind of the state and federal responsibilities, for what would the federal government do or expect with their money, and then what would the states do. So the Smith-Lever Act of 1914 created the Extension Service. So by that time, we had completed the three major functions of the university. 1862 came teaching. 1887 came research. 1914 came extension and outreach. Okay? Brought it full circle. And so 1914, the Smith-Lever Act said, to aid in diffusing among the people of the United States useful and practical information on subjects related to agriculture, home economics, of course that was our college, and domestic science, and to encourage application of the same knowledge that led to behavioral change. So interesting, right now we are preparing nationally for the centennial, the signing of the Smith-Lever Act, and there will be celebrations, I think, all across at all the land-grant universities across the country, and in terms of commemorating this whole notion of outreach, extension, engagement, taking knowledge to the people. So what's our extension service look like in the state of Oregon? Okay, and you'll see in a minute that our college has about 200 faculty and staff located in all the counties of Oregon. And if you look at the blue dots, there is an extension office, an OSU office in every county of the state of Oregon. Those are the blue dots, okay? And then the little orange squares are where the research and extension centers are, and then experiment station sites. Okay, and then the little the little triangles, red triangles, are another entity that's actually operated by College of Forestry, is Oregon Forest Research Lab sites. So we're actually doing research, in the field, and we also have these extension offices that actually have our faculty and staff of our college, plus faculty and staff of other colleges as well, that are still helping to bring to the people or diffuse among the people, relevant and practical information that they can use to improve their lives. In Oregon, we have 5 extension programs: Family and Community Health, 4-H Youth Development, Forestry and Natural Resources, Agriculture and Natural Resources, and Sea Grant. And we still get federal appropriations here in Oregon that were made available by the Smith-Lever Act in 1914, plus money that comes each year from Salem, from our legislature, that allows us to do this placement of these extension faculty and staff across the state. So over in Ballard Hall at that particular end, which is the south end, is the office of the Vice Provost for Outreach and Engagement, Scott Reed. And he gets these appropriations, and he gives certain amounts of these appropriations, federal and state appropriations, to different colleges, okay, to implement their extension programs, okay? And for example, the Forestry and Natural Resources extension programs are operated by the College of Forestry. Ag and Natural Resources are operated by the College of Agriculture. Sea Grant dollars to put Sea Grant extension agents down the coast go to several colleges, and the money for the 4-H Youth Development Program and Family and Community Health Extension programs come to our college, and as I mentioned, we got about 200 people affiliated with our college who are out there in the field, okay? And we are embarking upon something that's brand new that a couple of universities are beginning to experiment with, something called health extension, or public health extension, that is a new concept. You know, we started in agriculture 150 years ago, but we're really trying to pave the ground for having individuals who are public health extension agents sprinkled across the state of Oregon, just like we have 4-H, forestry, and those other. So we're working kind of behind the scenes, trying to secure some appropriations or some dollars to do some of this work, at least on a pilot basis to start. With a network of people focused on prevention, if the country does get behind it, we believe we can do what the nation's health, what extension of the last century did for agriculture. Okay? Bold vision, but there's a lot of talk about the next 100 years of extension. There's a lot of talk about the next 100 years of public health, and we believe that we can bring those things together, focusing on prevention, keeping people healthy, and connecting OSU, our first and only college of public health in the state of Oregon, with local health partners, extension offices, and that kind of thing. So that's something you might hear a little bit more about as we move ahead. So one of the challenges that we continue to work on, too, is bringing these three circles together. You know, I mentioned that 1862, 1887, and 1914 created these three major functions of the university. Sometimes they can function far apart from each other. Okay, research can kind of happen in labs and not necessarily always be connected, you know, to teaching and outreach and engagement. Teaching can kind of happen in the classroom, you know, and may not be connected with perhaps the research or the outreach and engagement functions. And extension agents can kind of sometimes do their own thing without connecting with the campus as much as they could. So one of the things that Dean Bray and I and the administrative team are really working on is bringing these circles closer and closer together so that we have more interchange as we move ahead. And I just leave some questions, you know, today to really think about how we do bring these three functions together. Can research questions be refined by engaging community members in purposeful dialogue to find out what the needs are for the research that people need information about in communities? Can community problems be solved through engagement with on-campus researchers? You know, the reciprocal nature of connecting communities with researchers and research projects. Can graduate students become more job ready by engaging in real-world experiences, maybe in some of these counties? Can internships, service learning, practical field experience, and student service benefit communities as well as experience for the students? Can community members help interpret and give meaning to research findings, taking the findings we have to the community and say, what does this mean from your perspective? Can practicing professionals participate in continuing education offered by OSU faculty? Like, can we, in fact, have institutes like Jeff did last summer and others, you know, where practicing professionals in the community can come and get updated with continuing education that we may provide to people in the field? Can input from employers help shape graduate, undergraduate curricula? You know, what do people need to be job ready? Can county faculty help identify high-achieving students of diverse backgrounds who exist in counties and point them to our college and to the university? So those are some questions. This is, you also see sometimes the phrase outreach and engagement. You hear about the extension service, but the university also talks about outreach and engagement. And outreach and engagement is kind of a reinvention of the old extension ways of doing things, but with a little bit of a twist. Okay? A lot of you probably studied, you know, things like principles of adoption or Everett Rogers' diffusion of innovation, you know, how an idea actually goes into practice in communities. And that tends to be very one way. Okay, in terms of we as folks at the big, smart university has stuff that people need to know and do, okay? A very one-way perspective of thinking about how we interact with our communities. But engagement actually is about a reciprocal relationship where we as researchers and academics engage as equal partners with people in community to talk about needs, to talk about how, in fact, we could together generate new knowledge that helps solve problems in communities. And a couple of years ago, I was thinking about this, and I wrote down this phrase, outreach begins with the answer, one way, engagement ends with one. And the difference would be that together we create solutions to problems that exist in communities. And I'm going to skip through these last couple of slides here. No, I'm not. I'm actually going to go back and talk real briefly about these two. But what is community engagement? The Carnegie Commission, and a lot of you know there's a Carnegie Commission on the Advancement of Teaching, for a long time has ranked universities on various dimensions of their performance. But a couple of years ago, back in 2005, they actually put together a recognition or an honor for universities that were doing a good job in outreach and engagement. And Oregon State University received that designation as a community-engaged institution in 2010. So we're a high-level research institution, but we're also an institution that is recognized for its outreach and engagement work. And Carnegie Commission defines this notion of engagement as fostering collaboration between institutions of higher education and their larger communities for mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge and resources in a context of partnership and reciprocity. A very different way of thinking about how we engage communities rather than them being subjects or learners from the university, co-creating new knowledge with people in communities. Some people also asked about, well, is there scholarship that actually comes out of this engagement with communities? And there's a newly created Academy of Community Engagement Scholarship that really talks about this thing called the collaborative generation, refinement, conservation, and exchange of mutually beneficial and societally relevant knowledge as communicated and validated by peers in the academy and in the community. And this academy is actually pushing the notion of what constitutes scholarship, where, for example, we're used to sending our great ideas to our peers at other institutions, having them peer reviewed and appeared in a journal. This academy is actually thinking, well, what about community members? What should they say whether this is of quality? Should they also have a role in determining whether this is relevant, okay, to our issues? So the whole notion of how we define scholarship, there's some people that are pushing the edge of that a little bit, out there. I don't know the answer to the question, but they're actually saying that, well, not just other academics saying whether our work is useful, but actually the people that hopefully benefit from it say that our work is useful. And there are this is interesting, there's also a Journal of Community Engagement and Scholarship, and they're, again, pushing the envelope. They say rigor is not solely based on the procedures utilized, but on the openness and transparency of the scholarly enterprise in ways that value and welcome active participation from academic and community scholars and practitioners. Different way of thinking about universities. And this journal, it was interesting that on this particular journal, I think was fall of 2012 edition, but it actually had an article focusing on some of the outreach Sea Grant type of work, and that's a little sketch drawing of lighthouse, I guess, down at Port Orford here in Oregon was the feature story of that journal. But anyway, as we close, there is also an annual conference of people that are really interested in expanding this notion of community-engaged scholarship. And this was off the cover of their conference program a couple of years. It said, higher education and communities are learning to partner in new and innovative ways so that together they inspire scholarship that will one day change the world. And I found that to be a very exciting way of expressing what it is that universities do and how they work with communities to make places in Oregon and around the world a better place to live. So thank you all very much for being with me today.
Thank you, Roger. You can see why the administrative team was so taken with this presentation, and always the knowledge and the passion and the humor he brings to everything that he does. So thank you for that terrific presentation. We have a few minutes, so let's go ahead and have some questions and answers.
Questions? Comments? Looking for jobs? Yeah.
I'd just like to say that wasn't as bad as I thought it would
Well,
be.
thank you. Really. I will use that for promoting. I will actually use that for promoting the next talk.
I actually told Roger he should come up with literally a 3-minute song, and maybe come up with a dance to go along with it.
Well, we're gonna try and do something. I work with Catherine and Heather next week. I think to really do a really concise 3-minute video on this. So if I can get the 50 minutes down to 3, that'll be a challenge.
Would you have that ready by the end of this term?
I think we probably can. I think so. I think so. And I can either put this online, this presentation too, if you need it sometime. Just let me know. I don't know if everybody wants it, but if you want that presentation, just let me know and we'll get it.
We'll have a link.
You'll have a link. Okay, great. That'll make it really
So you can
easy
check
to
the
find.
Valley Ford site, I think.
And seriously, I mean, we are always hiring people, and as we look, we look for people that really want to work and want to get engaged in communities and still be connected to the university. That's the beauty of these things is you're a university faculty member, but you're working in community. So some people that are having degrees coming up and interested in really doing community-based stuff, either on campus or off campus, we always have positions, and that kind of stuff.
So apart from the fact that it wasn't so bad, does anyone else have a question? Tony?
Yeah, so in the 90s, OSU undertook a new approach towards integration. How do you see that as sort of working? That's what you've come to, you don't know the before.
Yeah.
But of interest is, how does that compare to other land-grant institutions? What are innovative approaches towards...
Well, we are really innovative here in 2 ways. Still today, many of the extension services are not university-wide like we are, is that they are based, the whole extension service is based out of the College of Agriculture, so that narrows their focus. But we have an ability, because our extension service has central administration that distributes dollars and resources out to many colleges to do extension work, still heavily, in agriculture and our domestic sciences here. But that is one of the differences, is we are able to be broader here at OSU because we're not confined just to having the extension service operated through one college. So that's one of the pieces. The other piece that is neat too is that every one of those people who are based in those communities are affiliated with some college, school, or department at OSU. So that was an integration of extension faculty, with on-campus faculty. Now, we're still trying to bring them closer together, and that kind of stuff, but that's different too. In a lot of these universities, there are maybe between 5 and 10 universities where these individuals have some kind of rank or promotion system, only about 5 or 10. A lot of them are staff of the university, so that they can easily be disconnected from, faculty on campus. So we continue to build those relationships. We have a couple of unique things. One is that we have university-wide extension service, and number 2 is the fact that some of those individuals all those individuals that are located in counties have a link to your academic department or, in our case, schools. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, we are different. Yeah, Joe.
So how unique is the placement of an extension program, department, what have you, in a school of public health? How many other schools of public health have this arrangement? Yeah.
0.
0, yeah. So this is a unique opportunity.
We are the only accredited college of public health to have 2 large parts of the extension service embedded in it. We are really unique that way. Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
I know we're going to talk about this.
That wasn't even a plan. That was
well, I know.
Yeah.
You whispered in my ear.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the 612 seminar that follows. But, can you talk a little bit about some of the other ideas that you've had about how this could integrate with public health? There's the sort of community participatory model that I think is, common in extension, is also common in public health. Are there other things that you see?
Yeah, what's interesting is I was over at Black Butte Ranch for a couple of days this week. We had 16 of our newest extension faculty. We brought them together for a couple of day retreat there, where we kind of help them begin to understand, what their job is, being out here in the field. And one of the things that we really have found to all subscribe to, whether it's human development, okay, or public health, or youth development is really the notion of a systems approach to looking at our work, a socio-ecological model, okay, that everybody probably is familiar with, is that we understand that, you know, education for behavioral change only goes so far, right? Okay? That we know that, for example, to really make a difference, we can't just teach harder, can't teach nutrition and physical activity and all these. It can't just teach harder and hope people do the behaviors. Yeah. We have to look at other levels like parent, family, schools, workplaces, communities, and policies, okay, in those interlocking rings that you can see me drawing with my hands, okay? It's really looking at how do we make healthy choices the default choice, you know, how do we address the social and environmental determinants of health? So that's some of the things, that's one of the transformations that I think we have going on in Extension, where we always used to think that, gosh, if we just teach, you know, is that everybody's going to eat healthy. If we just teach them that they should be exercising every day, they'll exercise every day. But, you know, we need to think about those system-level interventions like, you know, the built environment in communities, policies in communities. What is served at the lunch line, you know, at schools, or what is available after school in an after-school program. We've got to change those contexts. One of the coolest things that happened a little while ago was we had these grants that Dean Bray made available to some of the communities where that allowed money for an on-campus faculty member with an off-campus faculty member and a county health department to engage in some community-based project that was supposed to result in some kind of changes to improve health. Well, to make a long story short, out in Jefferson County, and if anybody from Jefferson County or know where that is out there in Madras? Right? Yeah, Marie's there. Marie is a native, right? Or yeah, you spend a lot of your time out there. And this project was really cool because if you know about Jefferson County is that the population is 1/3 white, 1/3 Native American, 1/3 Latino. Okay, so what are we going to serve in the lunchrooms? You know, that is culturally appropriate and nutritious. So we had some of our on-campus faculty, off-campus faculty work together with the school district and health department to overhaul the entire menu that's served in the public schools there, with kids being taste testers, okay, to change the menus to find out what actually made sense. So that's an integrated research, extension, community-based project, you know, so people working in some different ways to do that. So some things to think about this afternoon. Yeah, Carolyn.
Director, I was really glad that you mentioned systems perspective.
Yeah.
Because at the beginning of my sabbatical last year, I spent a week at a systems theory and methods workshop. And they spent the first 2 days, rather than teaching us to use the programs, which is what I wanted, they spent the first 2 days talking about the importance of going out into the community, having focus groups, talking to stakeholders, developing models. And I said, this is extension.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the one difference between what they were advocating and what we do is that they had the systems, these wonderful little systems programs where you can plug in a bunch of numbers and come up with these mathematical models. And this is really big in public health right now. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole federal office in the Office of Behavioral and Social Science Research that's really pushing. There's a woman named Patty Mabry who's really pushing at this. And so I've been trying to say, why doesn't Extension sit down with some of the systems folks and really get this going off the ground? Because that would really make us unique.
It would, wouldn't it? Yeah. Absolutely. Bringing those folks together, you know, and those partnerships, you know, teams of people on and off in communities, exactly right, who use a systems perspective to make sustainable, long-lasting change and improve health.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Carolyn. Well, thank you again to Roger. It's 1 o'clock.